Chapter 6. Losing Your Footing.
You were running away without him? How could you? No. He couldn't let you go. If his suspicions were wrong and the Oiron wasn't the demon he was hunting for, or worse, there were two demons, you walking out there all alone would make you a prime target. And even if you weren't attacked as such, there was still a chance some dirtbag would come and pick you up instead. Zenitsu snarled at the very thought. If she was leaving, why didn't she ask for my help?
Tears welled up in his eyes at the notion of being abandoned again. Then they spilled over when his foot suddenly made contact with the sharp edge of a fallen branch.
Ow! Why was I too stupid to bring my shoes?
Zenitsu asked himself silently, covering his mouth so that any further sounds of pain would not alert you to his pursuit. From the sound of your footsteps, you must have been barefoot too, likely to escape as quietly as possible.
But what if you stepped on glass or something?
He fretted. No, it would be fine. All he had to do was catch up with you, and then he could carry you home in his arms. He would allow no harm to come to you, or your delicate little feet. But first, he had to know where you were headed to, and why. Hostages for ransom! The answer had been so obvious that it sickened you that you hadn't realized it sooner. One girl running away without packing anything was a little bit strange, but 4 in a row was absurd. It was nothing more than a cover story, a sham. Either management knew all along, and had been hiding the ugly truth of the matter from you and the other girls, or the entire establishment was truly too blind to read between the lines. It also struck you as no accident that the ones chosen were more traditionally beautiful than you or Chiyo or the triplets. Young ladies that would be considered unmistakably high in value. However, one iota of inconsistency had been prickling the back of your mind like a thorn throughout the day. If Ima was indeed kidnapped, how did the perpetrator manage to take her and the other girls without so much as a struggle? There was no noise, nothing broken, no blood on the floor. And it was while riding on that train of thought that you were brought to your current destination, the daimyo's house. A man of questionable integrity, who sold your Okiya the grand and glorious silks you draped yourselves in to draw the eyes of the public. Technically there were no daimyo anymore, but this house was once used as a hub for the shogun. The aforementioned owner continuously refused to let Western influence harm his country's traditions, so he would mercilessly beat anyone who didn't acknowledge his establishment as a fief. Apparently Omitsu owed the maladjusted man quite a hefty sum of money. The bastard probably thought he was just taking what he was owed. So you knew if anyone were to have the nerve to steal away one of your own, it would have been him. The only sensible explanation for their silent disappearances was that the girls must have known their captor. They were familiar with him. There was no other way he could have coaxed them out quietly before making his move. Still, even as you stood in the shadows of a neighboring building, preparing yourself for action, you couldn't help but feel like you were missing something. Why, if he were out to gain recompense for his losses, had he not left a ransom note asking for payment? Had he not figured out a way to exchange them anonymously yet, and feared the retribution of the law? Or had he actually already written a threatening letter to Omitsu, unaware of her passing, and it was just sitting in a pile of undealt with affairs in her former office? You prayed that was the case, because that meant if he were just holding them for ransom, he wouldn't do anything that might tarnish their worth. He would leave them with no new scars, perform no lustful activities. Unfortunately, you weren't certain one way or the other what his goal was. And if he didn't intend to ransom your friends, and instead considered them his just reward, the daimyo would do as he pleased with the girls, possibly selling them off for labor or worse. Now, if that was the truly dire situation they were facing, you had no choice but to break them out yourself. Tonight. After scoping out the area for passers-by, you slid into the alleyway on the left side of the house. In your bag rested your shoes for a quick escape, and a sharp kitchen knife, too, just in case. The cobblestone passage was lit, with one flickering lamp by the back door, and above your head sat a low awning, shielding you somewhat from its luminosity. Unfortunately, it still stood out of your reach. Even if you jumped, the most you could do was graze your fingertips across the side of the gutters. From behind the barrels where you crouched, you peered to the brighter end of the back street. Inspiration struck you when you caught sight of a merchant's cart, tilted down on its front beams, where the daimyo's horse would normally be harnessed in to tow his wares. The back of the wooden structure was lifted, paving a diagonal line straight towards another awning. You were certain of it. With a running start, you could grasp the edge and pull yourself up. Pulse quickening in anticipation, you stepped out into the light, praying no one would open a door or window and reveal your presence. Upon reaching the wagon, you slid your hand along unfinished wood, hesitating. It would make noise. No doubt when your weight left the buggy, the balance would shift back to the other side, resulting in a loud clack of wood on stone. When that happened, you knew you had mere seconds to cross the roof and take cover from whomever might come to investigate. At the base of the cart, your eyes traced the path upwards, and you took a deep breath, bracing yourself for the jump. But just before you could take that first step, you felt a hand grasp your wrist firmly. Your heart paused with dread, and an audible gasp was loosed from your lips. You had been caught. Though you were frozen facing forward, you could tell the calloused hands of a man anywhere, how his fingers' width spanned across your forearm. It was all over. Even if you managed to escape a fateful lashing, you'd likely not be returned to your house. You'd never see Chiyo-chan or Zenko-chan again. Not yet daring to breathe, you slowly turned to meet the eyes of your maker. Zenko-chan? Thick, bushy blonde brows furrowed at you. Her aura was serious, and wordlessly she pulled you by the arm back across the street and 2 houses down, where a little tree shielded you from the street lanterns. Fearful that she had spotted someone surveying the area, you kept silent and allowed her to lead you. When she turned and squared off with you, the courage to speak returned, albeit in hushed tones. Zenko-chan, what are you doing here?
I was worried you were running away without me.
Her tone rang a mixture of hurt and baffled.
But you're breaking into someone's house? Why?
A short while before the disappearances, I overheard Omitsu admitting to a fellow Okiya manager that she owes the man who lives here a lot of money. I know you suspect it too, Zenko-chan. You're not stupid. One girl leaving without packing anything is weird, but 4 in a row? They were kidnapped, plain and simple.
That's a valid theory, Chopper-chan.
The blonde paused, as if choosing her words carefully.
But you're only half right.
Zenitsu had to come to terms with this, that his deceit had led you here, and put you in mortal danger. Not that you'd been totally safe to begin with. The Oiran was a force to be reckoned with in her own right, demon or not. He had to correct this mistake. But how could he tell you the whole truth here and now? What if his involvement in secrecy made you sick?
Or what if you felt so violated by him that you would run from him?
What's that supposed to mean? You stared down your alleyway companion, and she began to fidget nervously before finally heaving a deep sigh.
The truth is, there's a demon.
A demon? You pulled her closer, eyeing your surroundings for any eavesdroppers before continuing. Are you serious? What makes you say that? Zenitsu wanted to tell you the truth, but underneath the scrutinizing gaze of your cross-examination, he felt his courage crumbling beneath him, as it always seemed to do when he needed it most.
You're, not the only one who overhears things, he lied. After you left the party, I overheard one of the men talking about a demon running loose in the Hanamachi. I thought he was just telling tall tales at first. But with how many unexpected disappearances there have been lately, I think that it's something we shouldn't rule out.
He watched you curl a finger to your lips, teetering on the verge of believing his words. Is that why you brought up the Demon Slayer last night?
Yeah, that's exactly right,
Zenko exclaimed with fervor, and you narrowed your eyes. You're lying.
Huh?
Zenitsu's stomach dropped. I've figured it out now.
You have?
The young man began to sweat, fearing his goose was cooked. He swallowed thickly and held his breath, awaiting your conclusion. Yeah. You know this Demon Slayer. You're helping him look for leads on a demon. And, if I'm not mistaken, you're also finding him a wife as well. You crossed your arms in victory at her panicked face, proud of your deductive reasoning. He must be paying you handsomely. You narrowed your eyes, tone turning accusatory. Isn't that right?
Oh, thank goodness!
He breathed out.
Yes! You caught me!
He falsely admitted, and felt a pang through his chest when your face sank. I'm hurt, Zenko-chan. I thought you actually wanted to be my friend.
I do want to be your friend!
Zenitsu hastily sputtered out.
That's why I offered the idea to you! I wanted to help you get out of your situation!
He saw you look up at him with hopeful, questioning eyes, and he softened.
I picked you because you're something special. You deserve a husband who will take care of you.
It was silent for a moment. In her own underhanded way, she was being genuine and sweet, and you couldn't help but feel the urge to forgive her. What business of it was yours that she'd found other means of income anyway? Were you truly angry at her for lying? Or angry at yourself for not being shrewd enough to think of it first? It was likely the latter more than the former, so you chose not to raise a fuss. But it was then that dread began to leak into your stomach, as the weight of her words sank in. Wait, if what you say about the demon is true, does that mean all those girls are...
Not necessarily,
Zenko interjected.
There were no traces of blood or anything, which leads us to believe they were captured and are being held somewhere.
Us?
Me and the, Demon Slayer!
He exclaimed.
Even if she figures me out, I can't afford to expose Tanjiro and Inosuke.
So, is there anything I can do to help? She placed both hands on your shoulders.
You can help by staying safe, Traveler-chan. The world would be a darker place without you.
The way she gazed into your eyes with fondness made you feel shy for some reason. Nevertheless, you smiled and pulled her into a hug. Likewise, Zenko-chan.
What was that for?
She shrieked out when you pulled back, face burning red. To thank you for coming to find me. You stopped me from making a huge mistake.
Oh, you're welcome.
She nodded, looking down at her feet.
I'll always come to find you, Travel-chan.
Ready to go home? You asked, holding out your hand, and she happily took it, guiding you back to the street. Oh, that reminds me, you chuckled. Your hands are bigger than mine. So when you grabbed me, I thought for sure the daimyo had caught me.
Huh, you don't say.
So tell me more about this Demon Slayer. You glanced over to her playfully. If I'm to run off and marry him, I'd like to know more about him. Is he strong? If he fights demons, he must be.
He doesn't think so.
Not very self-confident, You took note of that as you swung your clasped hands to and fro. Well then, what's his personality like? Zenko looked up at the sky, as if the stars had the answer, and sadness permeated her voice as she replied.
At heart, he's lonely. So he's been called a hopeless romantic before. He was raised an orphan. So he wants a family more than anything else in the world. And he wants to be better for the one he loves.
That's very sweet. You squeezed her hand at the touching idea. But I have to ask, why did you choose me to wed your demon slayer? Am I even his type?
Oh yeah, she answered quickly, as if it was absurd of you to even ask. And also because I know he'd take good care of you. He'd see that you're loved, and that you'd never have to do all the chores by yourself again.
Your eyebrows escalated at that.
Well, I guess if that's the case, I should be thanking you then, right?
Don't thank me just yet.
To be continued.